Hey everyone, welcome back to the Tracy Developer Meetup. This is another live meetup while things are getting better out in the world. With me tonight, I have Ray Camden. So if you received an email and you're here for skeleton loading screens with Dylan Babs, that was sent out incorrectly. My Streamlabs OBS apparently didn't send out the right message. So tonight's topic is actually the Jamstack, right, Ray?
Yes.
Yeah. Uh, if at we got somebody saying hi, Dylan. Funny guy. Yeah, so we are live. So this is an event that would typically happen here in Tracy, California. And if there are any issues with our stream, maybe there's a video problem, maybe there's an audio problem, drop them in the chat. If you have a question for Ray, drop that in the chat too, and I'll pop in and I will ask him questions because Ray may or may not be looking actively at the chat. But I'm going to be his mod to keep him running smooth. Is there anything that you want to add, Ray? I mean, I don't think I gave you a good enough introduction. You're a developer evangelist at Here Technologies, right?
Yeah, I have a whole slide deck on my bio, which I know being in the room at 1,000 presentations, that's my favorite part of every presentation is the speaker talking about themselves.
Yeah, we got comments saying that they love the Death Star that's sitting behind you.
I will move a little bit. That's like a whole table full of Legos, and my entire office all around me is just full of random Star Wars stuff and some GI Joe and Transformers. And yes, I am 47, if you can believe it.
Sounds like you're living every kid's dream over there.
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. So let me switch the mode so that way it shows your desktop as well as your face. It also will show the chat so that way we can see what's going on. And if it gets in the way, I'll go ahead and shrink it. But
Okay.
the stage is yours. I'll pop in anytime I'm going to ask a question to you, all right?
That sounds fine. I will kick it off. 1 second. Control Shift B. There we go. A bit more space. All right. So, as Nick said, I am Raymond Camden. I work for a company called Here. Actually, Nick actually got me into the company right before he left. So, thank you, Nick. No, actually, like really, really thank you because my last job was not ideal. But I've been at this company for almost a year or so, and it's been fun learning about mapping and location type stuff. I blog at raymondcamden.com and I tweet at Raymond Camden. On Twitter, my DMs are open. So if you have any questions about what I'm talking about today, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. I don't mind that at all. I love being able to take people's questions and turn that into cool demos or blog posts or presentations, even. So reach out to me on Twitter. If you're not on Twitter, don't join. It's not worth it. It's horrible. On my blog, I have a contact form, and you could definitely send me an email that way with your question. So my game plan for tonight is to start off talking about the Jamstack, and it's going to be a lot about what I think the Jamstack means and why it's important. We're going to look at one particular example of the Jamstack, and then we're going to talk about location services and take that and do a lot of demos with the Jamstack and location services. All of the code and the slide deck that I'm showing today is up on my GitHub repository, so you can grab it. There's definitely going to be a lot of links in this presentation, so the easiest way is to just get the slide deck, and then you have access to all the links. So let's start off by talking about the Jamstack. So number one, this is absolutely a marketing term. It sounds silly. It sounds a bit dumb. But so did the cloud 4 or 5 years ago. That sounded pretty dumb too. Uh, no one's arguing with me, right? It did sound dumb at first. Um, so when I kind of got into this area, we just called it static websites because that's what it was. It was, leaving the application server behind. But unfortunately, is that like every time I would talk about it, it'd be like, yeah, it's static, but you could do X, Y, and Z with it. You could do all this kind of cool stuff. And then somebody smarter than me kind of said, you know what? If we just give it a new name, then we could brand that name. And Jamstack is essentially how we branded this idea of, yes, we're talking about flat files and leaving an app server behind, but we are still working with a lot of really cool technology and able to create really cool experiences. So the Jam in Jamstack is a acronym. It used to be uppercased until the powers that be decided it should be regular cased, which I don't agree with. In that acronym, the J stands for JavaScript. And when we talk about JavaScript, we're talking about multiple different things. It could be just adding interactivity to a web page. Maybe it's a single page application. One of the things that I kind of harp on is that I feel like the front end development world over the last couple of years has focused all of its attention on building single page applications. And I feel that that's unfortunate because there are still people building simple web pages. There are people who are building a table of data and they literally just want to add sorting, or they want to add the ability to filter that table. They want to make a page look a bit better. And JavaScript obviously works great in that case, as well as the case of I'm building an entire application where everything is working with JavaScript. But really, where this comes into play is that JavaScript ends up being a replacement for things that we may have done on the server. So that example that I gave of sorting a table, that's absolutely something that could be done on the client side. In the past, I would use an application server like Cold Fusion, and I would hit that server every time I get the data, and I would resort in my SQL statement. If I was doing filtering, I would filter at the SQL level. Those are the kinds of things that can be done in JavaScript now that we don't need the server for. Next letter A stands for APIs. I assume most of us kind of know what an API is. Basically, any service that's going to work over HTTP. There are a few of these, and when I say a few, I mean like hundreds and hundreds. And this is a GitHub repo of public APIs, and I don't think they have a total anywhere, but as I scroll, you can just see there's lots and lots and lots of different APIs out there. So you definitely have options for working with them. The only thing I will point out is that if you are looking at using an API in JavaScript, don't forget about CORS, and that is the security issue where code on yoursite.com can't necessarily access an API on another site.com unless a CORS header is present on that API. Some APIs also require you to pass a key. For example, my company requires that. In the case of our company, we allow you to create a domain whitelist. So if somebody does steal your key by doing a view source, they don't gain anything. But if the API that you're working with requires a key and they don't have that kind of protection, then you're going to have to find a way to work around that. Luckily, there's a pretty simple way of doing that. Last part of the jam is M for markup. And with markup, we're generally talking about HTML, but typically HTML that's going to be generated from something simpler like Markdown. So we will have a template language, we'll have Markdown, and by using the Jamstack, it's going to output as simple HTML.
Hey Ray, I'm going to interrupt you real quick.
Go ahead.
We got a question from J12Y. What's the URL or name of the repo for that list that you were talking about?
It is github.com /public-APIs And it's on screen right now, and I made it bigger.
Yeah, let me type it in the chat here.
Sure.
Let me get it.
A lot of fun stuff here.
All right, I think we're good.
Cool.
Thanks.
No problem. So putting it together, there's kind of two core aspects. The first part will be your static site generator. This will be the tool that you'll actually use to generate the static output. Last aspect of this will be the host and where you put the actual result of using your static site generator. When we talk about SSGs, this will be an app server, but it's only going to be on my machine. But it's going to act much like local install of PHP, Node, Cold Fusion, ASP.NET, etc., where I'll run something locally, I'll edit files, I'll see updates. The big difference is that when I'm done, I will do something and the output will be simple, flat files, nothing that requires an application server. There are many, many options, and I will open up this link as well. If you go to staticgen.com, you can start scrolling, and if you want to check each and every single one of these to find the one that's best for you, you are going to be working for a good month or two as you go through, if I had to guess, I'll say 400 of these. So there are many, many different options. And that's good because just like frameworks, like when it comes to React versus Angular versus Vue, a lot of people gravitate towards one because one really works for them. And they will really gravitate away from others because they don't like it. So for me, I really, really, really like Vue.js. I used to like Angular, and I wouldn't mind if I had to use it again. And I really, really don't like React. As popular as it is, it just doesn't work for me. You will find the same thing working with static site generators. My own personal history, I began working with one called Harp.js. The website's still up. You could still download it and run it, but development hasn't been active for probably 2 years or so now. However, it was a great one to start off with because it was kind of simple. Didn't have a lot of features. I was able to learn it in like 2 hours. So it was a good kind of a gateway drug into the more complex ones. Speaking of, the next one I worked on is very popular is Hugo. It is extremely fast, but Hugo has a way of doing things, and it just bugged me. And that's not to say that Hugo is wrong or Hugo is bad. I did not like the way that it did stuff. I felt like whenever I wanted to do something weird, like output a small JSON file dynamically, I felt like Hugo really made that overly difficult. And again, that's my personal opinion. A lot of people love Hugo. I then switched to Jekyll, which was a heck of a lot easier to use. But I'm on Windows, and Jekyll requires Ruby. And yes, you can run Ruby on Windows, but I swear Ruby fights you to be. It's like it does not want to be on Windows. It's like it knows, oh, this is a Windows machine. I'm just gonna fight you tooth and nail. I would get it installed, and then I would pray that I would never have to update it or touch it again. So I liked Jekyll. I didn't like relying on something that I wasn't comfortable with having to manage on. Even though it's just my machine, I wasn't comfortable with it. I switched to 11 October of last year. Like I don't know about y'all, but like my entire concept of time is just gone. Like normally I have to think about what day of the week it is. Earlier today, I thought it was still May. So yeah, but I've been on 11 for 4 or 5 or 6 months now, and I absolutely love working with it.
Hey Ray, in
Yeah.
regards to Jekyll and Ruby, you said that it doesn't work so well on Windows. Is that even when using Chocolatey or through other means?
Every time I've installed it, it's been a bit of a hassle. Now, to be fair, like I think the last time I did it, it was okay. But it's one of those things where like when you've been burned a couple of times, even if they make it better, you still like are apprehensive of working with it. So I'm being overly dramatic about how bad it is.
Yeah,
Uh, but like I don't want to install it again. I don't want to do it.
got it. Makes sense. Thanks, man.
No problem. So when we talk about hosts, we're just talking about the web host, where we're actually hosting your site. So the good news is that all you have is files. So you don't have to ask them to set up .NET or PHP or Cold Fusion or MySQL or anything at all like that. All you need is a place that can host files. So there are a couple services that are tailored for that. Amazon S3 is one. Azure in the last month or so announced their support for static website hosting, so it's still kind of new. And essentially, like any ISP or anybody who just does website hosting uh, would be able to host static files. There are also companies that are working specifically with the Jamstack, and they have bells and whistles and things that they do to make it easier to work with the Jamstack. The two main companies are Netlify and Vercel. I am a huge fan of Netlify. I consider them the gold standard, period. Like every other company, I compare against them. I host my blog on Netlify, and my site is Jamstack for sure. Over 6,000 blog entries, so it's a pretty complex setup. But they just have great support, great features, etc. Vercel has some pretty cool features as well. And I tend to use Vercel when I'm playing around. So I want to put something up so I can show a friend, and I don't care if it's dead in a week or so. I'll use Netlify for my like forever projects, however long forever is on the web. And I'll use Vercel more for my toys and quick demos and things like that. Both offer a really good free tier. I'd recommend checking them out and just seeing which one feels best for you. So all of this begs the question, why? I spent 15 years working with app servers, most of that with Cold Fusion, and then towards the end doing more with Node.js and Express, and it was a lot of power. So why would you, kind of give that up? Number one is that it tends to be quite a bit faster because even with all the caching you may do, the app server is still in that process and still doing things when you request a file. When you ask for a static file, nothing is being done. It's just bits going straight to your browser. It also tends to be more secure. I'm not going to say secure. There's still things that you have to think about, but when you don't have to worry about managing a database server and a application server and patching the application server when it gets, when somebody hacks it, uh, then you have less things to worry about. And really, it's about the shifted complexity. And what I mean by that is before I went static on my blog, I had my own custom blogware running in Cold Fusion. And after that, I had WordPress. And on WordPress, my complexity was in the cloud. So I had a Google Compute virtual machine running Apache, running MySQL, running WordPress. And WordPress is an amazingly well done blog engine. As someone who writes a lot of blog posts, I loved working in it, but I hated maintaining it. I was shocked at how fragile it was out of the box. My site gets some traffic, maybe a bit over 100,000 page views a month, but that's per month. That's not a lot of traffic per day, and every couple of days, my box would crash. And maybe that was my fault. I'm sure it was my fault, but I really hated, going to bed thinking, when I wake up, is my blog going to be showing a 500 error? So what I have now, my blog is just flat files. I never have to worry about it crashing. Netlify does crash every now and then, but when that happens, they fix it. I have complexity in my blog setup, and I could spend an hour just talking about how I configured my blog with the Jamstack and how the processes that I have. When I write a blog post, it's rather quick, but I had to do a lot of work to get it to that point. However, all of that complexity is all on my machine. If I have bad code, if I have ugly code, I'm fine with that because it's not going to production. It's literally running to generate static files and then it's done. So knowing that it's only on my machine, knowing I don't have to worry about performance quite as much, this is a great freeing type feeling for me. Now, obviously, Jamstack is not going to be a solution for everyone. The editing experience for non-devs is the biggest issue. So, like for me, when I write a blog post, I open up Visual Studio Code, I generate a new Markdown file, I write some code on top to define front matter. I write my code, I deploy to GitHub. I have it's not a non-dev friendly experience. There are tools out there that make that easier. Netlify has an open source CMS product. My buddy Brian Rinaldi works for a company that I totally forgot the name of his company. Nick can look that up and tell me in a minute. But his company does CMSs for the Jamstack. So people have recognized that this is like the biggest issue. and they are creating services that make it much easier to generate content for the Jamstack. And if you do give up your web server, your app server, I mentioned that there are a lot of APIs out there, and that's great. Like there's an API for everything: databases, video conversion, sending mail, everything. If you give up your app server, you may find that you're using a lot more of those. So, for example, I spent a lot of time in Cold Fusion. Cold Fusion had things built in like mail, for example, and database access. I have to use a third party service for that now. So you may have some discomfort. You may not like being tied to 5 or 6 different companies and their APIs, and knowing that potentially if one of them drops, then you're kind of screwed. Obviously, it depends on what you're building and what your needs are.
So Ray, your
Yeah.
buddy Brian is working for StackBit.
Thank you. Thank you. I knew it was S something.
No problem.
So my personal take, obviously, I'm a huge proponent. When I look at my last 20 years of development, I've been doing web since about '94 or so. When I look at most of my history of working with the web, the Jamstack would have been appropriate for a large percentage of what I did. So I just like the way it works. I enjoy the whole system. I just enjoy the entire process. And just in general, seeing browsers, and again, talking about being in the web since '93 or '94 or so, browsers went from barely able to render anything to being extremely powerful. We have really, really great browsers now. You know, you can kind of poo-poo a bit on iOS Safari a bit, but even it is light years more advanced than what we had 5 or 6 years ago. So, that's another part of what makes me feel comfortable working with the Jamstack, and definitely seeing all those APIs. So I know, for example, there's a great API that does video conversion. In the past, I would have used FFmpeg and some local code on an app server. Now I know that I can just send a file to a service, let them handle it, and then let me give the results. And in general, like I'm really happy with complexity being on my machine, because again, it feels like I can write less than perfect code, and I absolutely have done that. And it's okay because it's only being run on my machine or only being run in the build process and not live in production.
So we have a question coming in on the chat, Ray. So this one's from Crutchcorn. We're being asked, can you explain the difference between content delivery network and content editors? So this is around the CDN.
So yeah, so a CDN typically, and I have a high level understanding of it, but this is the process by which I can put content in a place that's closer to you. So I have a static asset, a file, a graphic, an audio file, and instead of just hosting it in one machine in San Francisco, I could have a network of machines, one in Europe, one in Africa, one in Asia. And I have some process by which when you request that particular asset, I know where you are and I deliver the asset based on your location. So I don't work in that space. Netlify uses a CDN to improve your performance. They do it for me, and I let them do it. When I'm talking about a content editor, I'm kind of talking about a kind of typical old school web-based editing experience. So my blog used to be, I would go to my blog /admin, I would log in, and then I have a little form and a set of links, click here to make a new blog post. So I'd click that and I'd get a nice little editor where I would type stuff in. So a non-developer can handle something like that because it's no different than going to Gmail and composing a new email, or going on Facebook and writing a post. So that's when I talk about content editors and a potential issue with the Jamstack. But again, that is something that's being addressed by multiple different companies now. Hopefully that answers this question, or her.
I will bring it up if we have a follow up. Don't worry.
Cool. All right. So I'm going to spend a few minutes, a bit more than 5, talking about my current favorite Jamstack engine. And I don't want you to get necessarily too involved with this because this is just one example. Like I said, there are 400 or so different ones that have their own philosophies, their own way of doing things. Some are more restrictive, some are more loose. You have options, and for my particular needs, 11 just really feels great to me. So in a nutshell, 11 it is node based. So right away, I don't have to worry about installing Ruby. I have Node installed already. This as like a given, so it works well with that. It is extremely flexible. I mentioned that I had issues with Hugo being a bit strict. I felt a bit locked in terms of what I could do. Whereas 11 is just like, hey, you can do whatever the heck you want for the most part, and it'll just go along with it. Currently, version 11, that is a coincidence. It turned version 11 maybe a month or so ago, and they are talking about version 1. So being named 11 and being version 11 or 0.11, again, just a coincidence. You can find out a lot more by going to the website, 11e.dev. It's got a lovely UI to it and a floating possum, I believe, that is going to pop out any second now. And because I said that, it's not going to show up. Oh, there we go. All right. Not sure why, but that's their jam. So the install, because it's node based, will be npm install -g 11e slash, I'm sorry, 11, the number 11e slash 11d. And then the CLI is actually really simple, but it has two main modes. Either just take what you have and make a static output, or set up a local web server so that you could, work on stuff, reload, see changes, and continue to work. There are more options that you could pass, but in general, those two things are all you're going to do. So I'm going to show you a quick example. I go into my trash folder and make a new folder called test1. And I'm going to make a new file called test.md for Markdown. And I'm just going to write some Markdown. Hello world, this is me typing. You don't want to see my keyboard. It is disgusting. I need to blah I won't fix the typos. So I have a Markdown file.
You're typing
What
like
is
those
that?
hackers do inside the movies.
Oh, me. All right. Well, this, I don't have installed. There's actually a command line tool that does the load dropping text. I do that every now and then to impress my kids, and it never works.
Can you control plus on that terminal right there to get it a little larger? There we go. Perfect. Thanks.
Hey, give me a little bit more space. Saw like that, and we'll just do it one more time. I need to make my prompt a little bit smaller, I think. So my Markdown file is there. If I run 11, I have a very expensive and powerful Markdown processor. It's going to output to a folder called _site. You can configure that if you want. And then the result is going to be an HTML file. So not too complex. If I do 11d-serve, I actually get the web server on localhost 8080. So we'll go there, localhost 8080, and go to the file. So I named my file test.md. By default, 11e assumes that I wanted a URL of /test. You actually have full control over your pathing and stuff like that, but this is my file, and if I go here and say I'm really excited, I can reload and see it update. And again, when I'm done, I can go back one more time and just run 11e, and I get my output. So that by itself isn't too powerful. There's other command line tools that will convert Markdown into HTML. Let's start looking at some of the features. So one of the things it supports are template languages. And I mentioned that 11e is very flexible. So it supports every single one listed on there. I came from Jekyll, which uses Liquid. And I still use Liquid when I work with 11e. And I really freaking like that. One very cool thing is that within one project, you can use whatever you want as much as you want. So I like Liquid. However, on my blog, I had one page where I needed to do some very crazy code. EJS is a lot like classic ASP, and I don't mean that in a good way. It makes very ugly code, I think. However, it lets you do anything at all. So one more reason that I love 11D is that I was able to use Liquid most of the time. And the one page where I needed a bit more flexibility, I just dropped in EJS and that was fine. It supports layouts, a simple way to say, hey, for every single page, I want you to wrap it with a header and footer, and also doing basic includes as well. So if you want to write a file that included in multiple places, that's easy to do with 11E. Now, when we talk about template languages, if you've never seen them before, they are essentially HTML plus code. So it could look something like this: hello, bracket, name, close bracket, where the template language will look for a variable name and just replace the value before it renders the HTML. Typically, it'll also have basic conditions, so if cool, render that HTML, and also basic looping over arrays. So if I have an array of cats, I can iterate over it. Say for each instance of that array, I want you to save the data in a variable called cat. And I can make a basic list with that template language. Now, every template language has its own particular syntax, its own particular way of doing things. So instead of end if, it may be slash if in a different language. But this kind of gives you like a generic example of how this stuff looks. So I'm going to show you an example of a real 11e site, one that actually does a little bit. I have a file here called index.liquid. And again, I've done that because I want to use the liquid language. And I have on top front matter. And this is a very typical Jamstack type thing where you define metadata for your file on the top and use some kind of marker. And it's typically 3 dashes. And then name value pairs that specify data for this particular page. In this one, I'm specifying a title and I'm specifying a layout. 11e will see that front matter. It will look in a folder called includes, which again, you could tweak if you want to, and look for something called main.whatever. In my case, it's main.liquid. In this case, I took a Bootstrap template and all I did was in the middle where I know Bootstrap content goes, I put a variable there called content. 11e will take my page and stuff it in right there. I also did an include just for the heck of it. My footer is just some basic HTML, but I wanted to show you an example of what it looks like to include something within a template. So now if I run this particular file, I'll have the layout wrapped around it automatically. The variables I define are available in my layout as well. So when I did title, if we look at the top of my layout file, I'm able to use that as well. I built kind of a very simple blog where I have 2 posts. I put them in a folder. I named them apple.md and beta.md. And did the same thing. I gave each one a title and I gave each one a layout value. So if we run this, get out of trash, get into demos, get into demo 1, 11d serve. I will see, oops, when I go to the home page, I will see my blog. So I have my layout running. That's where the Bootstrap is coming from. I can see my blog post and go back home, etc. Like so. One thing that you get when you actually use a layout file in 11e is hot reload. So if I change a file and just say like, prefix or something, I'll save it, reload, and that may be a little bit hard to see, but my title tag does have prefix in front. I didn't have to reload the browser. That's a simple example, but we can make it a little bit more powerful. We can work with data. We can add our own short code and filters. So if you've worked with handlebars, if you've worked with Liquid, you know that they allow you to define custom functions, so date formatters and things like that. 11e makes it really easy to add your own formatters, filters, and shortcodes. 11e also has really good pagination support and also has plugin support for things like RSS. Now I want to focus more on data because I think data is pretty interesting. So this covers a couple of different areas. Data about your pages, which you already saw. My pages had a title, and that's just one instance of a piece of data. I could also have custom site-wide data as well. So let me show you an example of this. Let me close out a few things here. So I have made a new folder called underscore data. And again, that's something that you can configure if you don't like. I dropped 2 files in here. We'll look at the first one, cats.json. It's a simple array of cats with names, genders, and ages. And because I've used that particular name and that particular folder, when I go into a liquid file, when I go into this one, I can actually use that data and iterate over it. So this is kind of like having database access if you don't mind a flat file. But again, when I look at the, quote unquote dynamic websites that built over 20 years, a lot of them will have a database where a significant portion of the data was edited one time, when the site was being set up and was never touched again. Flat file would have been fine in that case. 11, when it runs this, it's going to know where cats come from, and it's going to let me iterate over each of these and render it on the page. Another thing that you can do is when I build a blog and I build some posts, I can add a tags value to them. In this case, my blog has 3 posts, and they all share the same tags value. In my homepage, in my index.liquid, 11 will take all of those files, all the files that share the same tag, and put them under a variable called collections. So collections.post comes from the fact that I used a tag value called post. So this will actually iterate over all those blog posts for me automatically. So I'm going to show this running. Demo2, 11 served. And blobbity, come on up. There we go. All right, so reload. I can see my post. This is my cats file. And if I were to edit that JSON, then that would show up. If I look at my blog, don't have much going on there, but my experience now, my authoring experience, and this is kind of close to what I do for my blog. I make a new file. I'll call it zoo.md. I make sure my front matter is okay. And by the way, I've automated all this for me, so it makes it a little bit easier. And this will be zoo foo dulu, and this is zoo. As soon as I save this, because I've used that tags value, 11 is aware of it and is able to render it. Now, in case you're wondering, yes, you can sort this by the date that they were published. You could sort it by any logic at all. And you can also do things like only getting the last 10 blog posts versus getting all of them like I'm doing here. Now, one more really cool example. So if my cats weren't static, if I needed to work with Mongo, for example, or work with some API service that hosted my data, 11 allows me to define a function in my data folder. In this case, I'm hitting an API that returns Star Wars films. So I can hit that API, I can get the data and just return it. And because I did that, because I called it films.js, I could build a liquid file that iterates over those films. So I'm going to show you this running. And there we go. So in this case, I can think about my data. Star Wars films, they were coming out every year. Now it's probably every couple of years. But, based on my own knowledge of my data and how often it changes, I can set up a process where I rebuild my site once a day, once a month, or, whenever. Or I can use a service that will hit me and tell me to rebuild. And then this page would automatically be updated. And again, I'm adding a lot of dynamic stuff here, but when I run 11, the output is just flat file. So for example, there's that films straight HTML page. So that was the 5-minute look at 11, probably close to 20 or so. But the good news is that like now you're totally a Jamstack expert. You can go to LinkedIn, add it to your profile. I literally did this yesterday. So you are welcome to do so as well. This is a good point to stop and ask if there's any questions.
As of right now, I don't see any questions, but they might.
They
Um,
might pop in.
they might pop in. I'm still looking at this Jamstack the way that it's spelled, and it does bother me.
Yeah, so like look, it went like this originally, which I thought was nice because the jam stood out as an acronym.
Yeah.
And then people said, we're going to do this. And I was just like, ugh. Because no, I think when you lose the acronym, you lose the kind of mental model of what you're talking about. So yeah, I won't go into how the names came about. It's drama. So nobody wants drama, right?
Nobody does.
Nobody does. All right. So let's talk location stuff. And disclaimer, so I work for a company that provides location APIs and services. I'll only be talking about my company for the rest of tonight. So I just want you to know that I'm not hiding that in any way whatsoever. Every single demo that I'm doing today could absolutely be done with another company's API. Nick, you're in California. There's I think a search. No, there's an advertising company near you that does mapping, right?
Is
And maybe
there?
a search engine as well. I can't think of their name, but yeah, there's other people who do mapping and location type
Oh,
stuff. So
all right. I got you. I didn't get it. I'm a little slow, so I got it now.
yeah, it's okay to say Google. They're not worried about us, I'm sure. Yeah, every demo I'm done. You can absolutely build it in other people's services as well. But because I do work for here, I want to talk about here, and I do like our services. Um, if you want to test out what I'm doing today, you will need to sign up. We have a very, very generous free tier, and we are very clear on the details in terms of what you could do. I can't tell you those details off the top of my head, but you're welcome to follow that link and look. It's absolutely something that you can play with and go into production with and not worry about paying anything. It's either 50,000 or 200,000 calls before you have to pull out a credit card. And you don't need to have a credit card at all to work on the free tier, which is nice. So I like Azure, for example, but you need to give them a credit card. And if you do something wrong, you bet they're going to charge you. So with us, if you run out, we just turn it off. So you don't have to worry uh, about that. There are lots of docs, examples, blog posts, etc. A lot more detail about what I'm talking about at developer.here.com. And don't forget that you can hit me up for questions later. You do have to generate a key, and I will show where this is done after you have logged in. And I can show this because I know we obscure the key. So once you have signed in, you will have a freemium project, and then you can go into your project and generate your keys. So now we differentiate between JavaScript keys and REST keys. You can use JavaScript keys to talk to our REST-based APIs. And if you do that, you can create a domain whitelist. You should absolutely do that. I didn't do it because I work for the company. I know they won't come after me for money. And I have my keys in the GitHub repo. But it would take all of 2 seconds to click this and say, mycompany.com is the only place where that key can run. So I guess technically you could clone my GitHub repo and just use my key. But I would ask you to please generate your own key and use that. So location stuff is a really kind of broad topic. I'm going to kind of bring it down to three main areas: maps, geocoding and search, and routing. So when we talk about maps, I'm talking about both client-side JavaScript rendered maps, and these are the maps that we're kind of used to, but also static image-only maps, which can also be really useful in certain circumstances. So we have a product called the Maps API for JavaScript, which, surprise, surprise, requires JavaScript. Sorry, but it's on the label that it's for JavaScript. This is how you would do interactive mapping type stuff. So you want to show a map and you want to add markers and you want to maybe dynamically add markers and you want to show routing. You want to draw shapes. You want to do overlays. You want to do geocoding, show traffic volumes and clustering and all that. This is the library that you would use to do that. I am absolutely not getting that deep into our map, so I'm going to keep it pretty simple. The basic setup, you begin by copying in a couple script tags. And if you look at that and you're like, whoa, why is there 500 script tags there? So one of the things that we do differently compared to Google is that our default map is very, very basic. And we don't do things like tap to drag and add zoom controls until you ask for it. Because we assume that you may not need everything. We want you to just get what you want. So those extra libraries are doing things like I do want to add the default zooming controls. I do want to add, pinch to zoom and zoom out and stuff like that. Once you have that, you find somewhere on your DOM where you want to render the map, and you could definitely apply CSS here to do sizing. And then you instantiate an instance of the platform, and you would put your key in there. And then once you've done that, you have a few more lines and that's it. I create some default layers. This is what will allow me to do things like a vector map or a satellite map. I specify how far I want to zoom in by default. I center it and I do some things for the graphic display and stuff like that. But really, that's it. If I do want the drag, drop, zooming, etc., and UI controls, then it's two more lines of code. So I have a demo of that.
So we saw
That
your
is
key on the previous slide. Is that the one that we can wreak havoc on?
absolutely go crazy. It's all over GitHub too, so I'm fine with that. And CodePen everywhere.
Oh,
So
there it is again.
yes, so this file is basically the last 4 slides. I nothing. The only thing different is I did give a size to my map, but everything else is as you expect. And if I go to localhost 333, this is under demos, map demos, test simple map, and then I have a map. And I won't spend too much time on this because it does pretty much what you'd expect. You could go around, you could zoom, etc. Now I have no markers on here. I have no points of interest. All of those are things that I could add. I have no click events. I could add those as well. So if I click on I-20, I could see information about that particular area. This is the bare bones, just show me a map and get on with it approach. So if you do want to start adding data and interactivity, you have multiple options. You have markers, shapes, overlays. You can do routing, and obviously you can do event handlers. I'm going to show an example of one of these markers because I think we make it pretty easy. You can make a marker object, give it its position, and then add it to the map. And literally that's it. If you want, you can customize it with a custom graphic like I've done here with the PNG. But then when I'm done, I again just add it to my map. And we support different types of markers besides what you see on screen here. So I built a demo in 11D that is a little bit more complex. So let me actually show it running first, and then I'll show the code behind it. 11D serve. All right, so 080. So what I have here is a map, and the icons, the markers that you see on screen, all of these are national parks. And I got the data from the national park system, and I just rendered it on the map. And we should have some in Hawaii as well and Alaska. So the way I built this was I got my data from the national park system website. It was a GeoJSON file, and I put it in my underscore data folder because I wanted 11E to have access to it. I built my map file at index.liquid, and this code is for the most part the exact same. But when I'm done with creating the default map, I do an AJAX call to load my GeoJSON. And when I'm done, I iterate over each of those parks, and I just add a marker for that park. Now, one thing that I had to do a bit special in 11E is that, stuff in the underscore data folder, that's not actually produced. If I look in site, I don't have that folder. So I wanted National Parks GeoJSON to be available to me in production. So I built a liquid file and I did two things. I outputted the data because remember 11e gives me access to anything in underscore data. And I told 11e, when you're done, save it to this file. And this goes back to the flexibility that I really appreciated. And I felt like Hugo just fought me and just like would not allow me to do. But that's how that works. And I want to show one more thing. So because I have it available in 11e data, I can show another feature, which is its pagination. And I do that with some front matter on top. I tell it what data I'm working with and what my size is. And all I do is create a template. And in this case, 11e will give me the data in a variable called pagination.items. I can iterate over that. I can show my data. And it also gives me pagination variables that allows me to do things like go to the first page, go to my next, previous, and so forth. So this is all I need then to support a list of parks. And this, and to be clear, like all my demos are kind of ugly. That's not the fault of 11e. I could definitely make this look nice. For the most part, the Jamstack never cares about the HTML. It assumes that you will tell it what HTML you want, what CSS, etc. So far, so good.
Yeah, everything's good so far.
Coolio. So that's dynamic maps. And again, I barely scratched the surface of what you could do with it. We also do have a static map API that we call the Map Image API. This still supports things like markers and routing, but it won't be interactive. So for example, you can ask for a map with routing and you'll see the route on the map, but you won't be able to change it dynamically. Why would you do this? Well, email is a great example. Voice assistants, I won't say their name because if I say their name, about 5 devices will say, yes, can I help you? But both of the major companies that do voice assistants, they have devices with screens that can show stuff. So you could definitely use that to show a map. And you may just not need an interactive map. That's totally possible. And you could skip downloading and running JavaScript and just run a image.
I think
So
for
when I
shenanigans, you should just start saying those buzzwords out, so that way anyone without a headset on, it makes theirs go nuts.
I will be nice. I will. Now, when we say API, it's not an API. It's literally an image source. So I guess technically it's an API, but you copy this URL with the additional parameter into an image tag, and that's it. So you're not doing like fetch. You're not doing an AJAX call. You're literally putting an image tag, like I did in my HTML presentation here, to render this particular map. Now I could do more options for sizing and stuff like that, but literally this is how I centered it on that particular location. I randomly picked this other option. If I don't have the Latin long, but I have a city and a zip, the API still works with that. And this little I parameter, put a little info banner on top. So again, this API supports a heck of a lot of them. All I did, back in that same national parks demo, I built a second pagination feature where for each of my parks, I'm going to output a call to the map image API, and I have embedded the geometry, the latitude and longitude. By the way, I did one more cool thing. I said I'm fine with my key being available. However, if I'm using that key in a lot of places on my site, it'd be really nice to have it in one variable. So back in my underscore data folder, I made a file called site.json and literally just put my key there. So that's what allows me to embed the key there and not have to worry about repeating it. And that space is bugging me, so I'll save that. And if we look at this particular example, it's pretty similar, but now I have the images on there as well. And yes, again, I could have rendered this somewhat nicer. This is not a great HTML page. That's mapping, which again, with me spending only like 10 or 15 minutes on it. When we talk about geocoding and search, we're talking about a couple different things. So geocoding basically is, if I give you an address, can you tell me exactly where that is? The flip side of that is, if I give you a precise address, can you tell me what's there? Along with that, we have this idea of search. So given an address, can you tell me what things are around there? So geocoding at the simplest level, I pass in a query string, I pass in, the address in my API key, and then our service will give me data about what it thinks, or where that location is, or where it thinks that location is. In this case, I was looking for the Cajun Dome in Lafayette, Louisiana, and the first result was absolutely it. We return a lot of data about that. So you see a full address, you have the latitude and longitude, as well as some information about how well it thinks it did that result.
Are you able to zoom in on that just for the sake of clarity? Perfect.
Was that?
Oh, that's way too big, but we're good now.
Yeah. So the reverse of that, just a different API endpoint. In this case, I'm passing in a particular latitude and longitude. And now my result, and we'll zoom in again, is showing where it was. And I clicked on a map to get that latitude and longitude, so I know this is correct. This is our airport. It's saying it's a house number because that's technically the terminal address for that building. But if I render this on a map, then I would definitely see the airport. And then a quick example of this in the Jamstack. Fire up my demo 4. And let me show you this running back over here. So what I've done here is I had some cat data, and I wanted to render precisely where they are. Now, I would never do this because most humans can't look at this and understand what this means. But what I did was this. My initial data was a simple set of cats, but my locations were all strings. They weren't precise addresses. So within 11, I told it to, I said, I want you to iterate over all those cats, and then I want you to call the here geocode API and translate that to an exact position. That is then what allows me to use it in my index file and output that particular address. Now, again, what's cool about this is that this is all done when I'm generating the site. The resulting HTML will not be calling here services. It'll just be just showing the HTML. If more cat data came in and I re-rendered, once again, I would do those geocoding calls at build time. But if I get 5 million page views on this HTML, I'm not having to refine where those cats are. One more example for search. So search is all about finding POIs, or points of interest. We kind of have two main endpoints for this. We have a couple more, but these two are the ones I think are more applicable. Discover, basically, I know the name of a place I went to, and I'm trying to find it based on where I am. Or I am looking for something in particular. So I am looking for restaurants or banks that are around me. And when I say around a point, our API support that. Like, I'm at a point, what's near me, or it supports look within a box or look within a circle. As an example of our Discover API, I tell it the location, I give it a query, in this case, restaurant, and pass in my key. And shockingly, there are a lot of restaurants in Louisiana. And what's really nice is that you get a lot of data back. So I find out more about this particular restaurant, that it's a tourist distraction, it's casual dining, and it has live entertainment. I also get the types of food. So it's seafood, it's Cajun and chicken. And I get the phone number, the fax number, if I want to pretend it's 1980. And there are multiple websites, email contact, as well as open hours, and nice simple is open to see if it's open currently. Browse is kind of the other way, where I don't know of a name per se, but I know what I want. In this case, I specify 4 categories, all related to various tourist things. So monuments, museum, parks, leisure places. If I run this particular example, I get, as my first one, a park. And I can look at the categories to see exactly what it is. So in this case, it's a park slash recreation area. So if I want to add, and so just a bit more about categories, because this is an area where I think here does an extremely like over the top good job. So we have 3 levels of specificity. Specificity. You can get very specific. I'll say that. And if you look at our docs, we actually have 2 separate category systems. One is kind of broad and will cover things like I need a bank, I need a restaurant, I need a hospital. And you can get more precise, and that's at 3 levels of being specific. So I don't just want coffee, but I want a tea house, for example.
Can you smash that zoom button once or twice?
Yeah.
Wait.
Yep. And this, so if you can see that scroll bar on the side, there is just an insane amount of stuff. So I literally did not know that for this faith, they called it a Gurdwara. I'm probably mispronouncing it, but I could specify that. If I want to look for a waterfall, yes, I'm actually surprised. That's kind of cool. So it gets pretty detailed. But what blows me away is that the food system is crazy insane as well. So like if you like Asian food, you're probably happy with anything, right? Take me to a Chinese buffet. But if you ever eat with someone who really likes Asian food, like you can use our APIs to say, we have 18 different Chinese settings, so Szechuan, Cantonese, Shandong, Northeastern Mongolian, hot pot. By the way, if you've never had hot pot, it's amazing. Chinese Islamic, I did not know that was even a thing. You can get crazy deep, complex in terms of what type of food that you're looking for. In fact, I built a demo of this today where it gets your location and then it tells you, like, Nick, based on where you are, most of the restaurants around you are American. The second most popular is like hamburger, and third most popular is pizza. It tells you stuff like that, which I just thought was kind of interesting.
Sounds about right. Did you look that up prior, or did you just take a guess that was the type of stuff that was in Tracy?
No, but you know what? All right. Do you mind if I run my demo real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
It's off topic. No, don't do that. Cancel. It is dashboard. No pins. Food report. Okay, so this is gonna be for me. Yes, know my location. It also tells me the types of restaurants around me as well. So like casual dining obviously is probably the most popular one you can imagine, and I'm not shocked at all that bar and pub is third. But in terms of food, American, no surprise. Seafood, no surprise. And American Cajun, no surprise as well. But yeah, sorry, I got distracted. I do have a demo that shows this. And I will run it first. 11D serve. Yada, yada, yada. Close, close. Too many windows. Get back to this. All right, so for this demo, I was imagining that you built a site for cat adoption, and you want to help the visitor by telling them what pet food stores are around them. So what this particular application does is it uses geolocation. It then uses the Here APIs to find the pet food stores that are near me. And if we look at this in demo 5, so I have a basic Vue.js file, which you can definitely do on an 11e site. And most of my logic is it's going to be in my JavaScript. I call that browse endpoint, pass in my key, pass in the category. Again, this stands for pet food store. And then when I'm done, I just save the information. I did a little bit of mapping to make it a bit easier to know if something was open. You can see that right there. But then when I'm done, it's literally just using Vue.js to render those results. Next aspect I want to talk about is routing, which starts off pretty simple. It's just, going from A to B, how do I do that? But then it gets progressively more complex from there. You have things like isoline routing. So I'm here. How far can I go in 5 minutes or 5 gallons of food of gas? Intermodal routing, where you want to support using public transit. So I may walk part of the way and take a bus or a subway, to continue the way. I may be driving a truck, and that truck has a huge size, which means I can't go under certain bridges, or it may have hazardous material, and I may want to route a certain way. And as we all know, half of all Marvel superheroes are made by a truck carrying hazardous material and it bouncing, and the stuff pours out and turns somebody into a superhero. So this gets really, really complex. Again, check the docs to see more. This is one example that's about as simple as I can make it, where I'm doing a car drive from my home to, I think, New Orleans. And if we look at that API, and I'll zoom it up again, it is very descriptive. So it's giving me directions. It's telling me, to turn and how long I'll be doing this step. So it gives me the full set of directions, and I will keep going down. And I forgot where it took me to, but it does have information for plotting on a map, as well as a summary, which was somewhere up here. This demo may not have it, but I could also give a basic summary of how far I had to drive and how long it took. So with that kind of in mind, I built a similar demo for my pet store. And I will show you that. And this one is instead, it's going to tell you basically how to get to the store. So it's going to look at your location, and it's going to tell you how to drive. And this one I put in Dallas, I think. So I have a little bug there. I didn't hide the loading message, but you can see it's going to take me about 5 hours and cover around nearly 400 miles. And then I rendered the results. And again, this is a horribly ugly cat background GIF that I chose. Don't blame here. Don't blame Elevany. This is all me. The code behind this, again, is pretty similar to before, where I use some JavaScript. This case, I do get your location, and then I pass that and the route to the here API. So just a couple of more things I want to cover, or just at least mention. I talked about hiding keys and cores. Serverless functions makes this really easy. So I can create a serverless function that talks to here, passes my key, and then I can call that from my static website JavaScript. I don't have to with here. We support cores. We allow you to restrict your keys to certain domains, but if you still want to hide the fact that you're talking to here, then you can do that with a serverless function. Another kind of cool thing that you could do is manipulate the result. So when we do routing, we may return multiple results. That can be a lot of JSON data back to the client. You could actually strip that stuff down, make it a little bit simpler, where you return a smaller payload to the client, making their experience a bit better. Another thing that you can do is that a Jamstack site can produce an API. So if you remember the demo I did with the map, and I showed the markers for the national park system, all of those parks was available on the web as a simple JSON file. That is kind of an API. It's a read-only API. It's an API where you can't filter and sort, but my static website can still expose information in a data-friendly format that an API consumer could make use of. So I mentioned, I have talked about the Jamstack quite a bit. If you want to look at my stuff, you can go to my blog. And I have a category, static sites. I've not renamed it. I probably never will. But you can look at, a couple of different posts talking about this area. With that, Nick, any questions?
I'm looking through the questions here. There's no questions. There's a lot of chatter. There's specifically a lot of chatter around this this cat background that you've got going on. Um, but it's all good, man.
Y'all, yeah, if y'all want that, that is in the GitHub repo.
I think I'm personally good on that one. But it's bringing me back to 1999 for sure.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Oh, I'm getting feedback here saying that it's not A11Y friendly, so that's accessibility, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and to be clear, this was a dumb, quick little demo. I would never use this graphic in real life. It's horrible.
Now, this is great so far, man.
Cool.
That was a lot of demos.
That was a lot. It was, yes.
Now, I've been sharing your stuff on Twitter as we progress. I've been doing all kinds of good stuff. In real life includes demos meant to teach people. That's what the comment is. It says in real life in quotes includes demos meant to teach people with some goofy faces. Yeah. So I mean, was that it? Should I go back to our anchor mode here?
Let's do anchor mode. Let's do big head mode.
Big head mode. All right, we're back in big head mode. Your screen is no longer visible. It's dark in my room, so I don't know how exactly visible I am. Looks like I'm a little visible on the camera, but totally sold me on 11T. Perfect. Yeah.
Cool.
Good one, man.
And hopefully here as well.
Hopefully, yeah. You went pretty in depth on here, so that's good. Loved it. So just while I guess questions maybe trickle in, I'm gonna go over some more logistical stuff. Maybe actually, can I go back to your screen? Can you open up your web browser, because I don't have a scene for this, so I can't share mine. I should have thought ahead. Can you go to tracydevs.com? I'm gonna talk about our next meetups.
Tracy, is that with the E-Y or Y?
Just a Y.
TracyDevs.com.
Correct.
If I could spell.
All right. I had put this into the chat earlier. So for most of this year, we've been meeting online on Twitch, and I had just put out a question regarding the technical resume building workshop, which would be July's meetup. So if you click on that, on the upcoming events, the one below yours, my question is, does anyone who feels comfortable enough to meet in person for this? Because if we don't have enough people confident and comfortable because of all the illness spreading around, I may have to swap some things around, because it probably doesn't make sense to do this one on Twitch, because you probably don't want to expose your sensitive information on your resume to the entire internet. At least I wouldn't want to. So I mean, if you're still around, if you're in the Tracy area and you're in the chat, at some point tonight before you log off, just say, hey, yeah, I'd be comfortable. I'd wear a mask. I'd put some sanitizer on. Or no, let's hold off, and we'll continue to do this online. So we've got one saying that count me in. I know that I saw another one for count me in, and another one that said I'm out. So it's a mixed bag so far, but I'm still open to the idea. But I won't pressure it for sure. What about you, Ray? If there was a local meetup in your area, would you go out or no?
I would go out, but reserve the right to, look at what I see, and I'll ask if I don't like it.
Sure.
We're meeting friends for the birthday tomorrow night at a restaurant, and same thing. Like, if I go there and it looks sketchy, I'm just gonna leave.
Gonna bail. All right, yeah, that's acceptable. Totally acceptable. It's why I'm asking. We do have 3 more on the calendar though, with a 4th one coming soon. These ones will all be remote. So building React UIs visually. There's a machine learning. There's an Electron session, and then there's going to be a PWA, so a progressive web app, so introduction to like Workbox and service workers and things like that. Those will all be on Twitch. The only one in question right now is the resume building one, because it wouldn't make sense.
I'll go. Why not? I'll
You'll
fly.
go. You'll come. All right.
Yeah.
We'll get you some tickets. All right. I'll switch it back to just us, so your screen is no longer necessary. So this session, if you missed it halfway, I'm gonna throw it up on YouTube sometime this weekend. So I shared the link in the chat. I'll share it one more time on how to find it. So just visit that link on YouTube, so you can catch it on demand. If there's any questions that you have, I'll after this session, I'll forward them to Ray, and Ray may or may not respond. Probably not.
Try.
I don't know.
I'll try.
And I mean, if you have any ideas for future meetups, if you want to present, or if there's a topic that you're interested in seeing, I know we do a lot of JavaScript around here, but maybe there's other stuff you want to see as well. Totally open to it. And then I mean, finally, I guess follow this channel so you don't miss out, or subscribe to the Tracy Devs newsletter. The only emails I ever send to that newsletter are a reminder of the event a week prior, and then an email with the YouTube video after I upload it. So those are the only ones you'll receive. If there's no other questions, then I think maybe we'll call it. What do you think, Ray? I know that you're staying on, what is it, midnight over there for you right now?
It's like 10:16. Which is late for me.
Yeah. Yeah, we appreciate it though. We appreciate you. You do good stuff, man. You're the one who got me into this stuff cool. 6 or 7 years ago. So you're my inspiration on all of this.
Am I the wind beneath your wings?
Yes, definitely.
Cool.
All right, so then let me throw up our thank you screen, and thanks once again, everyone.